Have you ever noticed how some people change faces, but never really change roles in your life? Different names, different cities, different beginnings, but somehow the emotional ending feels strangely familiar. You meet someone emotionally distant, and again, you become the one chasing closeness. You meet someone unpredictable, and again, you become hyper-aware of every text message. You promise yourself this time will be different. Yet a few months later, you're standing in the same emotional weather wearing different clothes. And at some point, a terrifying thought quietly appears. What if it's not bad luck? What if I've been unconsciously choosing what feels familiar, even when it hurts? Most adults think attraction is random, chemistry, timing, fate. But psychology tells a different story. The people we are drawn to are often mirrors of unfinished emotional patterns, not because we consciously want pain, but because the nervous system mistakes familiarity for safety. A child who learned that love had to be earned may become an adult who constantly chases emotionally unavailable people. A child who felt ignored may later confuse inconsistency with passion. Someone raised around criticism may feel strangely uncomfortable with calm, healthy affection because peace feels unfamiliar. And this is the hidden tragedy of adulthood. Many people are not finding partners, they are finding emotional recreations of their past. Tonight, we're going to explore why you keep attracting the same kind of people, not through shallow dating advice, but through psychology, attachment theory, philosophy, and the deeper patterns most people never notice. Because sometimes the problem is not that you keep meeting the wrong people. Sometimes the problem is that your nervous system keeps recognizing the same emotional blueprint and calling it love. And once you see that blueprint clearly, your entire life begins to change. Imagine someone sitting alone in their apartment after another failed relationship. The room is quiet except for the sound of traffic outside. Their phone screen glows in the dark. An old conversation remains open. A final message reread for the 100th time. I just don't think I can give you what you need right now. Different wording, same emotional ending. And they begin asking themselves the questions millions of adults secretly ask. Why does this keep happening to me? Why do I always end up caring more? Why do I attract emotionally unavailable people? Why do healthy relationships feel boring? The answer usually hides far deeper than dating itself. Because attraction is rarely just about the present moment. It is often memory disguised as chemistry. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote that we are rarely driven by logic alone. Much of human behavior is unconscious. Invisible forces beneath awareness shape our choices long before our conscious mind creates explanations for them. And nowhere is this more visible than relationships. Most adults think they are choosing partners rationally, but often they are choosing based on emotional familiarity created years earlier. A person who grew up needing to perform for love may later become addicted to proving their worth in relationships. Someone raised around emotional unpredictability may unconsciously equate anxiety with intimacy. Another person who never felt deeply seen may become obsessed with emotionally intense connections because intensity temporarily feels like validation. The strange part is this. The nervous system does not prioritize what is healthy. It prioritizes what is familiar. And familiarity can become a prison disguised as attraction. Think about how many people say things like, I don't know why, but there's just something about them. Sometimes that something is not compatibility, it is recognition. Your mind recognizes emotional patterns before your logic does. This is why people often ignore obvious red flags in the beginning. The body is too busy chasing emotional familiarity. You can know someone is inconsistent. You can know they avoid communication. You can know they disappear emotionally whenever intimacy deepens. And yet, part of you still feels magnetized toward them. Because unresolved attachment wounds often create emotional cravings that logic alone cannot solve. Attachment theory explains that our early relationships teach us what to expect from closeness, not intellectually, emotionally. A child who experiences reliable affection usually learns. Love is safe. I matter. I can express needs without fear. But many people never received that emotional stability consistently. Some grew up around emotionally distant parents. Others experienced love mixed with criticism, unpredictability, guilt, or emotional neglect. And over time, the child adapts. Not because children are weak, but because survival requires adaptation. A child who receives inconsistent affection learns hypervigilance. They become emotionally alert, careful, sensitive to changes in tone, mood, silence, or distance. That survival strategy may help them emotionally survive childhood, but later in adulthood, it quietly follows them into relationships. Now they overanalyze text messages, fear abandonment, confuse emotional unpredictability with depth, become addicted to reassurance, feel anxious when someone pulls away. And without realizing it, they recreate the same emotional atmosphere again and again. Not consciously, automatically. Like a song playing quietly in the background of their life. There's another side to this too. Some people learn the opposite adaptation. Instead of chasing closeness, they learn to avoid dependence altogether. Maybe vulnerability felt unsafe growing up. Maybe emotional expression was mocked. Maybe they learned that needing people only leads to disappointment. So they build emotional distance. They become highly independent, self-reliant, difficult to fully reach. But underneath that independence is often fear. Fear of losing control, fear of vulnerability, fear of emotional exposure. And here is where relationships become psychologically fascinating. Anxious and avoidant people often attract each other. One fears abandonment, the other fears engulfment. One chases closeness, the other retreats from it. And together, they create emotional intensity that feels intoxicating at first, but exhausting over time. The anxious person mistakes pursuit for love. The avoidant person mistakes distance for safety. Both are reacting to old emotional conditioning, not present reality. This explains why some relationships feel emotionally addictive. Because unpredictability activates the nervous system. When affection is inconsistent, the brain becomes hyper-focused on obtaining it, like gambling. Occasional rewards create stronger attachment than constant rewards. A warm message after emotional distance suddenly feels euphoric. A small moment of affection feels disproportionately meaningful. And slowly, emotional inconsistency becomes chemically mistaken for passion. But healthy love usually feels different. Quieter, steadier, safer. And for many adults, safety initially feels unfamiliar. Some people sabotage healthy relationships because calmness feels emotionally empty to a nervous system trained on chaos. This is one of the saddest realities of adulthood. People often reject peace because they were conditioned to interpret anxiety as love. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once described anxiety as the dizziness of freedom, and relationships reveal this deeply. Because real intimacy forces people to confront themselves. Not the curated version, not the social version, the unhealed version. A healthy relationship removes distractions, and suddenly unresolved fears become visible. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of inadequacy, fear of being truly seen. This is why relationships can feel so psychologically exposing. Another reason people repeat patterns is identity. Human beings become attached not only to people, but to emotional roles. The rescuer, the fixer, the caretaker, the emotionally strong one, the one who stays no matter what. These identities often begin in childhood. A child who had to emotionally support unstable parents may later become addicted to saving emotionally unavailable partners, because being needed became connected to self-worth. And this creates dangerous relationship dynamics. You stop asking, "Is this relationship healthy for me?" And instead ask, "How can I make this person love me properly?" Notice the shift. Your energy moves from self-respect toward emotional earning. But love that must constantly be earned rarely feels secure. Many adults spend years trying to finally receive from romantic partners what they could not consistently receive earlier in life. Validation, safety, approval, emotional presence. In this way, relationships become unconscious attempts to rewrite old emotional stories. But the tragedy is this: you cannot heal childhood wounds by repeatedly choosing people who reopen them. You heal by becoming conscious of the pattern itself. Carl Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That sentence alone explains countless relationships. Because what feels like fate is often repetition, not punishment, not destiny, pattern recognition. The mind loves predictability, even painful predictability. Imagine someone who grew up emotionally unseen. As an adult, calm affection may feel suspicious or unfamiliar, but emotional distance feels recognizable. So they become intensely attracted to emotionally unavailable people. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because the nervous system whispers. This feels like home. And home is not always healthy. Sometimes home is simply what you survived. This realization changes everything. Because it means attraction is not always truth. Sometimes attraction is unresolved memory wearing a beautiful face. So how do you begin breaking these cycles? The first step is learning to separate emotional intensity from emotional safety. These are not the same thing. Intensity often feels immediate, fast chemistry, obsessive thinking, emotional highs and lows. Safety feels slower, consistent, calm, predictable. And many adults raised around emotional inconsistency initially distrust calmness because chaos trained their nervous system to stay alert. Imagine living beside a loud highway for years. Eventually, silence itself feels uncomfortable. That is what emotional healing often feels like at first. Unfamiliar peace. The second step is recognizing your attachment triggers. Notice what activates you emotionally. Do you panic when someone becomes distant? Do you lose attraction when someone becomes emotionally available? Do you feel responsible for fixing emotionally wounded people? Do you overinvest early because you fear losing connection? These reactions are not random personality flaws, they are clues. Clues about the emotional survival strategies you learned long ago. A powerful exercise is this. Instead of asking, "Why am I attracted to this person?" ask, "What emotional feeling does this person create inside me? And where have I felt that before?" That question alone can expose years of unconscious repetition. Because often the attraction is not about the person themselves. It is about the emotional environment they recreate. Another important framework is understanding the difference between attachment and genuine connection. Attachment says, "I need you to regulate my emotions." Connection says, I choose you while remaining connected to myself. Attachment rooted in fear often creates emotional dependency. You begin abandoning your own needs to preserve closeness. You tolerate disrespect, ignore incompatibility, shrink yourself emotionally, because losing the relationship feels like losing emotional survival itself. But healthy love does not require self-erasure. Real connection allows individuality to survive intimacy. One of the clearest signs of emotional healing is this. You stop feeling addicted to unpredictability. You stop romanticizing emotional distance. You stop chasing people who only value you when you pull away. You stop interpreting breadcrumbs as deep connection. Instead, you begin appreciating consistency. And at first, consistency may feel strangely ordinary. But ordinary peace is often far healthier than dramatic chemistry. This is where philosophy becomes deeply useful. The Stoics believed much suffering comes not from events themselves, but from unconscious attachment and distorted perception. Epictetus taught that peace comes from understanding what is within our control and what is not. You cannot control whether someone chooses emotional maturity. You cannot force honesty, depth, or reciprocity. But you can control your standards, your boundaries, your willingness to leave situations that repeatedly damage your emotional well-being. And boundaries are not punishments. They are emotional architecture. They protect your nervous system from repeatedly entering environments that reinforce old wounds. Many adults struggle with boundaries because boundaries threaten attachment, especially for people afraid of abandonment. Sometimes saying no feels emotionally dangerous because childhood taught them that love could disappear when needs were expressed. So they over-accommodate, over-explain, over-give, until resentment quietly replaces intimacy. Healthy relationships require something many people were never taught: the ability to remain emotionally honest without abandoning yourself. Now let's explore 3 core frameworks that can radically change how you understand relationships. The first framework is called the familiarity loop. The familiarity loop explains why people repeatedly choose emotionally similar partners. The brain associates familiarity with survival. Even painful familiarity feels psychologically safer than uncertainty. This means you may unconsciously gravitate toward people whose emotional behavior resembles old attachment dynamics. Not because it feels good, but because it feels known. Breaking the familiarity loop requires conscious interruption. You must begin asking, does this person feel peaceful or merely familiar? That question can prevent years of repeated suffering. The second framework is emotional hunger vs. emotional compatibility. Many relationships begin through emotional hunger. Loneliness, validation seeking, fear of being alone, desire to escape emotional emptiness. But emotional hunger can distort perception. When starving emotionally, even inconsistent affection feels valuable. Compatibility asks different questions. Can we communicate honestly? Can conflict be handled safely? Do our values align? Can emotional trust grow consistently? Attachment hunger often ignores these questions completely, because urgency replaces clarity. The third framework is nervous system recognition. Your body often reacts before your conscious mind understands why. Certain people activate old emotional states immediately. This is why some connections feel intensely magnetic within days. But intensity is not proof of destiny. Sometimes it is proof of unresolved emotional conditioning. Healing involves teaching the nervous system that calm connection is safe. Not boring, safe. This process takes time. and it can feel emotionally disorienting, because part of healing means grieving familiar chaos. There is a strange sadness in realizing that what once felt like love was often anxiety mixed with longing. But there is also freedom in that realization, because now you can choose differently. Now let's move into something practical. How do you actually stop repeating these relationship patterns in real life? Step 1. Create an emotional pattern inventory. Take a journal and write down your past significant relationships or emotional situationships. Then answer these questions honestly. What traits did these people consistently share? How did I usually feel around them? What role did I play emotionally? What behaviors did I tolerate repeatedly? What emotional fear kept me attached? Do not write only about them. Write about your own patterns too. Because awareness is the doorway to change. Step 2. Identify your emotional triggers before dating seriously again. Notice what immediately creates obsession or anxiety. Do you become attached after small amounts of attention? Do you idealize emotionally unavailable people? Do you confuse being chosen with being valued? Many adults never pause long enough to observe their internal reactions. They only react automatically. But emotional maturity begins when observation interrupts impulsive attachment. Step 3. Learn to slow down attraction. Modern dating culture rewards emotional acceleration, fast intimacy, constant texting, immediate emotional fusion. But healthy connection usually reveals itself slowly. Give yourself time to observe consistency, character, emotional accountability. Anyone can create chemistry temporarily. Very few people can create emotional safety consistently. Step 4. Practice secure behaviors before secure feelings fully arrive. This is important. Healing is often behavioral before it becomes emotional. You may still feel anxious while practicing healthier choices. You may still feel discomfort when choosing emotionally available people. That does not mean the choice is wrong. It means your nervous system is adjusting to unfamiliar safety. Step 5. Strengthen your relationship with yourself outside romance. Many unhealthy attachments form because people rely entirely on relationships for emotional identity. Develop emotional independence. Friendships, purpose, solitude, creativity, reflection. The stronger your internal foundation becomes, the less likely you are to cling to emotionally unstable connections. A relationship should enrich your identity, not become the sole source of it. And finally, step 6. Stop romanticizing potential. One of the most painful habits adults develop is falling in love with who someone could become. Potential can trap people in years of emotional waiting. But relationships exist in reality, not fantasy. Do not build your emotional life around imagined future versions of people. Pay attention to patterns, consistency, actions. Because repeated behavior reveals emotional truth more clearly than words ever will. Imagine standing beside a river at night. The water keeps moving, flowing past stones shaped by years of pressure and repetition. Your relationship patterns are similar. They were shaped slowly over time, through childhood experiences, past heartbreaks, unspoken fears, invisible emotional conditioning. And for years, you may have believed these patterns were simply who you are. But patterns are not identity. They are learned pathways. And pathways can change. Not overnight, not through perfection, but through awareness practiced consistently. Healing attachment wounds does not mean becoming emotionless. It means learning to love without abandoning yourself, to connect without losing your center, to to recognize when attraction is rooted in familiarity instead of genuine alignment. One day, you may meet someone whose love feels different, less chaotic, less addictive, less emotionally exhausting. And part of you may initially distrust it, because peace often arrives quietly, not like fireworks, more like exhaling after carrying tension for years. You stop overanalyzing every message. You stop fearing every silence. You stop performing for affection. And slowly, your nervous system realizes something extraordinary. Love was never supposed to feel like survival. It was supposed to feel like safety. Maybe that is the real transformation of adulthood. Not finding perfect people, but finally becoming conscious enough to stop repeating unconscious pain. And perhaps the most powerful moment in healing arrives when you stop asking, "Why do I keep attracting the same people?" and begin asking, "Why did those patterns once feel emotionally familiar to me?" Because that question leads inward, and inward is where lasting change begins. The people you repeatedly choose often reveal the emotional stories you still carry. But awareness gives you the power to write a different story. One built not on fear, but clarity, not on emotional hunger, but emotional honesty, not on chasing love, but finally understanding it. You are not attracting the same people by accident. If this resonated with you, share your thoughts below. Sometimes hearing another person's experience reminds us we're less alone in our patterns. And if you enjoy calm, psychology-driven reflections like this, you can subscribe for more.